Hello, Mike.
Welcome back to Perspective Shift. How we doing, Frank?
Doing well.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, same here, man.
Did you have a great Mother's Day weekend?
I did.
Good.
Yeah, I did. Even
Good.
though I'm not a mother, I had a great one.
Enjoyed your time with the mothers in your life?
Yeah, the mothers in my life.
Good,
Thank
good.
God I only have one.
Back in the Perspective Shift seat today. So who are we covering on our episode today?
You know, we're going to cover Dan Millman, and
Yes.
I'm going to give a shout out to Athena Drummond. She's
Yes.
the one who recommended it. So anyone out there listening to the show, if you have any recommendations, we'd love your recommendations because I almost forgot about Dan.
It was a fun one for us to dive into, too.
Because I remember watching the movie The Way of the Peaceful Warrior like years ago. Nick Nolte was in it.
Hell yeah.
You know, he's an older actor, but I enjoyed the movie. The movie, you know, if they redid it today with a greater budget, they could probably do something better. But nonetheless, it was poignant, you know. So,
do you remember when that movie... The book came out in 1980. Do you remember when the movie came out? Was that in the late 90s?
Yeah, they were somewhere in the night. I forgot when. I remember when it first came out because just the topic of the dealing with like talking about Peaceful Warrior.
Yeah.
But I was also a Nick Nolte fan, so
Hell yeah.
yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, Athena, thank you so much for the recommendation.
Yep.
This was a fun one for us to dive into these last couple of weeks. So here we are today bringing you Mr. Dan Millman. Dan was born in Los Angeles. He has authored 18 books. Yes, 18. His most popular, of course, is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. There was a movie made about that, which was super cool. Dan was a world champion athlete. He was a university coach, a martial arts instructor, and as well as a college professor.
Yeah, and obviously he was gymnast. He's big into gym, so
that was he won the gold medal. You know, I think he won like 4 gold medals or something like that in '65. They were talking about when I was reading his biography.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so we obviously utilizing this practice in...
Takes a lot of discipline to win medals like that.
Yeah, focus and being present, and that's kind of what his the theme of his life story with all his books are wrapped around that type of
Message.
Yeah, exactly, the message. So, and that's what we're here, just to give you the perspective on how Mike and I see it, and you take whatever you want from it. But we definitely recommend diving more into this gentleman and see what you guys find.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The thing I like too is there's people all over the world, all in different situations, you know, careers, life paths, all of the above, and we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, just
know?
differently, and I think, and that's what happens in this world today. We're starting to see that there really isn't a wrong way of talking about it. There's ways that don't work. We obviously know that, but a lot of times too, if you're talking about it differently than you would talk about it, I would talk about it, and sometimes you think there's only one way to talk about it. We get very defensive and fight over it, but it's ridiculous. You know, each sun ray that leaves the sun is, you know, shining on some part of the earth, but what it's shining on isn't wrong. It's just the particular ray that's hitting the earth.
Watching this video with Kayla over the weekend, and it was this guy sharing that story. We've talked about this story on this show before, but the elephant with the 5, blind men. And so there's these 5 blind mystics, right? And they're all feeling a different part of the elephant, and they're all describing the elephant, saying, it's big like a wall. And the guy's, pushing on the side of the chest. No, it's around like a tree stump, and gentleman, with his arms wrapped around his legs. No, it's hard and sharp, as he's holding on to the tusk. And none of these 5 gentlemen are wrong. They're all describing their experience of an elephant.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I look at not only religion, because that's what the example of the elephant with the 5 blind men is about, which is, hey, we're all talking about the same thing, but expanding that even further into, gymnastics, per se here, or Dr. Joe, meditation, in the neurobiology side of things. We're all describing this same type of consciousness. We're all describing this presence. We're all describing this moment that's right now, and it just changed again after I said that. Now it's right now, it's this fleeting, ever-present moment.
Yeah.
That's where you find the magic.
Yeah, and a lot of information we talk about on the show is to get you to contemplate these things. But I think the first video we're going to start out with where Dan, he actually gives a practice to
Nice.
the audience.
That's a good first
Yeah,
video.
which is good because talking about stuff like that encourages people, gets them generated. But if you don't take the step into enacting it, you'll have no idea what we're talking about. And that's where a lot of the criticism of people come in, because I've seen it all the time. Like I had this one client I was working with. In the first, she was very hard-headed in absorbing the information, and it's her will to do that. I don't care either way. But she would be arguing about this isn't working. I'm like, well, did you do it? She goes, well, not yet. She wanted to intellectually understand how it works. I'm like, listen, I can intellectually explain these tasks to you, but if you don't do them, you're not going to experience them to the degree in which you need to experience. And how you experience it is going to be different than me completely. So I can only intellectualize on whatever I experience. And every time I do it, it changes. So until you take the action and do the work, you'll have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It sounds good, but most people do have experience in these things and may have not known that, oh, that's what it was. It wasn't, it wasn't necessarily because I did this. It was because when I was doing this, I was there. I was focused. I wasn't thinking about anything else that generated this love for the thing. It wasn't the thing per se, but the thing onto itself was the expression of that moment of me being silent.
Yeah.
And that's all we're talking about. So we can use whatever practice you want, but if you're not practicing some type of stillness, whether it's through the practice of just simple breathing or meditation, the mind is going to take over and you're going to be running around. It's going to be like watching a movie, but you're not really watching a movie. You're watching clips of different movies, and there's no conclusion. There's no, if somebody came out with 50 movies and all they show is little clips of it, like that would be rather aggravating because there's no fluidity in it, and you're going back and forth. And that's how most people's minds work.
Yeah.
They go from this thought to that thought to this thought.
And we just bounce back and forth.
Yeah, and if you just stop breathing and let that thought go on, don't attach to it. Like, oh, it's interesting. All of a sudden, you start to feel this calmness, and all of a sudden, you don't even notice the thoughts come in.
Well, and this is where the importance and value of learning how the mind works, happens and starts. Because you start to learn that, thoughts come up, they're not my thoughts. See, we think we are our thoughts.
Yeah.
We identify so heavily to them, or with them. We think, oh, that's me thinking this. Not, oh, a thought has come in, and that thought can easily go out. We think we possess the thoughts.
Yeah.
We say, these are mine. When in reality, they're not yours. We're sharing thoughts, and thoughts are in this ether and in this space around us. And when something comes up, you acknowledge it. Okay, that's there, but it can easily drift out.
And it always does. Nothing remains the same. The same sun doesn't remain tomorrow. It keeps changing. And even though, and that's to examine this stuff, you don't need to have any more experiences. You can just look over the experience you've had. Like, you didn't have a thought that remained continuously. You can go back and remember a thought and maybe feel the same energy, but not quite because it didn't happen the first time it happened. But you realize, okay, that came and went. Like the sadness of something came and went. Now, a year ago, I could go back and look at it. I'm like, oh, yeah. And I still hold on to that definition. But even if I try to still hold the same definition, it still doesn't have the same value of sadness, if you will. It's diminished. Why? Because nothing remains the same. And so now that we already have that out of the way, what is it that we want to attach to? The present moment. So open your mind to everything and attach it to nothing is seemingly the way to live life. It means you allow things come in, but you also allow them to go. So you're open it. But when you open your mind to everything and try to attach it to everything, you could fall into a cult that way. Mm-hmm. But if you close your mind to everything, obviously there's no attachment. Now you're stuck in a room or a box, what we call a prison. So those are very different ways of living on the end, like when I call the spectrum side of living. And somewhere in the middle, it's like open it to everything, but attach it to nothing, and you'll have great experiences. Because if you live to 100 years old, you're going to have 100 years worth of experience, whether they're in hell or in heaven and somewhere in between. You're not going to have any less experiences. They're just going to be different, So the more we learn to just get into the flow and be present and get into these little practices, like, he's going to talk about it, like, you notice, when was the last time you noticed you were breathing? Just noticing your breath from the physiology of the body lowers everything into a normal status where you feel better. You feel a little more relaxed to deal with whatever you're dealing with. Like even having a conversation with someone, notice that you're breathing. And when you notice you're breathing, all of a sudden you start to relax. Like anyone that does public speaking, the first thing you should do is notice your breathing. Don't try to look at people in the audience as they have underwear on. I think that's funny. Like, oh, they all have underwear. Well, that's putting them at a disadvantage. We don't need to put people at a disadvantage for me to feel better. I just have to start. Relax. Every time.
Learning how to use this instrument.
And you notice people that are very good at public speaking, they know when to pause. It's because they're breathing. And then over time, they don't have to necessarily think about it. It just happens.
And you'll see that in his public speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all about breathing and knowing when to breathe. When you're working out, if you don't breathe properly, the lift or whatever it is you're doing is difficult. But when you learn to breathe, all of a sudden, this is a lot easier. So when things are getting difficult, start with the breath. And then then move outward from there. And that's kind of how
the breath is so important.
Yeah, in the physiology of the body. Beyond that, the mind or the understanding of our soul doesn't even need breath in a sense, but we're talking about the physiology of the body in a more practical way, because that's really the message here. It's not about getting too esoteric. Those are differently, like once you get beyond that point, you can get there. That's just a fun game to play, but we're dealing with how to make our lives easier in difficult situations, not trying to get rid of difficult situations.
That doesn't work.
No, good luck with that. Yeah.
Well, that's what's so funny, especially in like the spiritual community. It's almost as if people expect never to get to this point where you're never going to have a tough day or a hard day or a bad day or to be upset. And that's not the goal. That's never been the goal. In fact, this is a yin and yang. This has never been, there's never going to be a time when everything's just going to be working out perfectly. I don't care how many hours you meditate or how many, sat songs you sit in.
Yeah.
It's not going to bring you to this point where you deflect any type of nuisance or pain or suffering. That's part of life, you know, like Buddha said, life is suffering.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I started down that road where I was trying to do all these techniques to avoid what I deemed to be negative experiences. And what would happen is in the midst of doing the techniques, I didn't really have too many thoughts. So I'm like, it was working. But then when I stepped out of them, all these negative things happened. So I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I can't possibly meditate anymore because I got to go to work. Like, what do I meditate 8 hours a day? And through that course, so for me, it was actually a nice journey to take. So I realized that wasn't really it. Even the story of the Buddha, after he noticed there was ill will on the planet because he was hidden from it by his father. And a young boy, he noticed it, and then he got to a point where he finally left the palace, and then he renounced everything, no more things. And he goes, well, that doesn't work either. Mm-hmm. And then he found the balance point, And that's kind of what it is. So sometimes taking that hard turn to like, I'm going to renounce everything, it shows you that's another difficult journey. And then as time went on, I realized, wow, instead of trying to create the world in which I think I want, why not start to redefine the world in front of me in the moment and let go? I'm like, why is this bad? All right? Why am I comfortable in this situation and not in that situation? And then you start to read about people that are highly successful. Well, they put themselves in very uncomfortable positions, but they willingly do it. So there's a little comfort in that, right? And then when I'm like, okay, let me try that. And I start doing stuff like that. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, it wasn't that bad. And actually it was kind of cool when it came out the other end. And it wasn't even cool when it came out the other end. It was actually cool when I was in it.
Yeah.
And then it just gets a little more intricate. There's no perfecting this thing, but it's amazing how I don't even want to say get lost in it, where you're actually one with the moment in which you're in. Even if it seems hard. What seems hard when you're doing something is wanting to finish it. But when you get into it, like when I was lifting weights this morning, there's a certain workout that Some of them I could do. I could just be in my head and no big deal. But this one I can't. So I literally have to breathe out each rep, because if I don't, my arms just collapse. And so it forces me to breathe. And I'm like, okay, this is like a real meditation, lifting this weight, you know? And so whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, but then I'm like, okay, you know, I have to focus. And if that starts out my workout, everything I do after that, I start to breathe, and all of a sudden I get through it so much more efficiently and easy. And at the end, my mind's quiet, it's still, I feel really good. And so now I want to make everything I do, like the drive to the gym, I'm doing that. In the gym, I'm doing that. The drive home, sitting on this podcast. Always remember to breathe. And I'm just using this as a metaphoric, actually. But yeah, obviously, if I don't remember to breathe, my body knows what to do, because I'll just pass out. But when I forget not breathing, I go back to breath. And all of a sudden, wow, it was a great day. And then someone's like, why was it a great day? I'm like, because I felt present. Yeah, I still got unwanted bills. You know, I got, employees at my job that have a problem, but that's okay. That's just life. I'm not trying to stop that. That doesn't bother me.
Stop that.
No, you can't. But if I'm frustrated, I have a difficult time dealing with that. So I almost have to take it. I'm like, okay, I'll be right back. It's like Superman going into the phone booth to put his outfit on. I'm like, why couldn't, why couldn't Clark Kent just fly? Yeah. Like, why do you, why can't? I was like, I gotta be right back. So I'm like, I had to go into the phone booth and like come back. Okay, what's the problem now? You know?
Seriously.
Yeah. Because Clark Kent had the ability to fly, but he just didn't want people to know. So yeah, so when I could maintain that, I don't need to disappear and come back and sound and look like a ridiculous person. Like Frank, he left frustrated, came back all happy. What the hell happened?
No need for that.
Yeah,
it's funny how we do that. You know?
And the more you practice these little simple things, like just breathe in 5 times and breathe out. Notice that, and all of a sudden you're going to notice it more and more. And okay, now I notice when I'm not breathing, like focus on breathing. Okay, who cares? It doesn't matter. I go back to breathing. All of a sudden, you see the moments in time when you're feeling really good, and there's different variances of feeling good, are longer and longer. And subsequently, I don't.
Things begin to work out.
Yeah, and they work out because I see when they're working out. But it's not because I breathed 100 times and noticed it, and more money came. Like, it doesn't work that way.
No.
It doesn't work. The things weren't problematic when I was in a calm state.
Well, I'll throw this out there because I know this is something I experienced and went through. Your mind will play these tricks on you where it will tell you you've got more important things to do. You're wasting time. This is
that's what Karen does for
you
me.
You gotta focus on this. There's money to be made. You got 5 things you got to do to prepare for that party. Whatever it is, your mind will always try to pull you away from the present moment, and it's learning that that's okay. That I'm not going to fight, because the more you try to fight that, the more you get tuggled up with the mind. You just kind of, there's no use in fighting. You can't fight it. You got to simply allow it. And you allow it by recognizing, hey, that's okay that I'm having those thoughts. And you refocus the attention. You bring the attention back to the breath.
And
it's through repetition.
Yeah, but play it as you're playing a game. So when you find yourself getting distracted, don't get upset. Like, I look at life as a game or a playground, not a school. Like, I'm doing bad in school. I'm like, no one's ever done bad on the playground. All right. Now, you could look at life as a school. You could look at it any way you want. My way isn't correct, but when I look at it this way, it's so much easier and lighter. So when I get distracted, and I can tell when I'm getting distracted because I'll get a little frustrated and stuff like that. I actually start laughing inside. And I might look crazy to those around me, see me get frustrated. Like, what's so funny? I'm like,
I was letting this get me.
Yeah, and sometimes you just don't have the moment to explain it, so you just laugh it off and whatever. And I realized I was hoodwinked into believing being angry was the way to go, where I could choose either way, and I prefer to choose. It seems to work better for me to be more playful in life. Mm-hmm. And I still get things done. Matter of fact, I get it done better. So
exactly, I was going to say,
greater.
You'll start to start to see how things, truly work themselves out without, your narration is pretty much what it is. Without you narrating it, still everything gets done. Things happen. Continue to move forward. This whole world doesn't come to a halt simply because you've taken your attention off of thinking constantly and putting it on your breath. And that's where, at least for me, I experience the world's not going to fall apart simply because you stop neurotically thinking about it.
No, and if any of those people out there that have these self-defeating thoughts, laugh at those as well. Because once you notice a self-defeating thought that's not working, you've already solved the problem. You don't have to go back and clean it up. In the moment when you're talking bad about yourself, just noticing it stops it. And if you understand that you can laugh at it. If you don't, you're like, oh, this is who I am. I'm like, it's who you were in a particular moment in time. And that moment is past. It's like looking up at the sky and seeing clouds and then telling people, I'm like, oh, you better not go there. Why? It's cloudy. I'm like, what do you mean it's cloudy? Like, yeah, I looked up, it's cloudy, so I'm not coming back here again. It's like, well, that was one particular moment in time. You looked up and you saw a cloud.
Exactly.
Unless you live in Seattle, then it's always that way.
Then you're screwed. I'm excited for us to play a clip of Mr.
So
Millman.
let's start off with this one because it is a practical.
Well, this relates to everything we were just talking about.
Yeah, so here we go.
A perfect
Here's
start.
Dan Millman.
Many times during our day, we stop breathing or begin breathing very shallow, minimal to maintain consciousness. When someone's taking a photo of you, have you noticed when you're posing for a photo, you've all had an opportunity to do that? It's usually like this. Very difficult to breathe while someone's taking a photograph. Try it with a selfie sometime. When we're pouring liquid into a glass, often we'll hold our breath momentarily. Blood pressure goes up, just spikes, and then back down. When we're doing any focused activity, there's even a term for it, texting apnea. Often when we're at the keyboard, we realize we have hardly been breathing. So this is one form of mindfulness. Now, if I could ask you, just for your health, to benefit you, to stand up once more, but this time, consciously, inhale your way up to your feet. Float up to your feet with the inhale, and when you sit back down, exhale your way back down to the chair. So you inhale up, everyone did that, and back down. Thank you. And if you're a rebel, you can exhale on the way up and inhale on the way down. That's okay. But remembering to breathe is one daily practice of mindfulness that we can do. Now, if I can ask you to do one other little exercise, which is just to close your eyes. And please keep them closed to get the most benefit from this next exercise. Now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and see in your mind if you know the answer to them. For example, what color is the carpet? What does the carpet on the floor here look like without looking? Think about it. How about how many chairs are there on stage? Are you calculating now or remembering? If you have a person to your right, what are they wearing? If there's a person on your left, what are they wearing? Final question, what are you wearing? Well, probably you can handle that one. Now, there's no right or wrong here. It's just an interesting kind of exercise. Please open your eyes and look down at the carpet. And glance at the person to your right and or left. And notice what they're wearing. How many chairs on stage? How accurate were you?
Yeah, I like these type of techniques because the breathing one keeps you really present. The other one, actually, even close your eyes, helps work on your imagination, and that's kind of like the two different areas of life: being present and then utilizing your imagination in a more practical way or productive way. Because the thing is, we're always imagining. It's just, are we imagine our life going to hell in a handbag or prospering?
Well, that's what I kind of started doing with myself, too, on my own personal journey. I started asking myself, well, what if this works out? well, what if this, goes in the direction I want it to go? What if this works in my favor? Rather than worrying about every single which way something could go wrong.
Yeah.
And truly, that was such a big moment for me, Frank.
And what do you like when you do that? What's the thing you notice the most when you say things aren't going to work out opposed to when things work out?
A lot of relief. Like a lot of relief.
So the way you feel about it.
Yeah.
And the way we know this, when we feel good, outward projection to the world is going to be more delightful. If I feel good, I'm going to treat people better. And all down the road, I'm going to treat myself better. But if I feel bad, I might not purposely not treat somebody bad, but I might be distracted where I don't notice them.
But you know what I mean? You just tell somebody or you say to yourself, well, what if this turns out great? What if this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing? And when you start to just pose questions like this to yourself, you take the sting out of things, and you can help your mind, or help you get out of the mind too, which is, if I don't do this, then this won't be ready, or, I need to do this, this, and this in order to accomplish my goal. So this is extremely important. The more we put things on this pedestal, the more we make it make or break, this has to happen. That level of resistance is actually repelling the situation you want or would prefer, your preference, away from you.
Yeah, and when you're thinking that way, you know what you do? You stop breathing. So right when you're having these thoughts, don't say, oh, these thoughts are wrong. Just stop breathing. Go right to your breath, and all of a sudden those thoughts just pass on, and they seem to be, I don't want to use the word ridiculous, but they don't seem to have any effect on you anymore. So don't try to counterbalance the thought with a what we call a positive thought. Mm-hmm. Just let it go. It's like blowing. Like when you breathe in and breathe out, you're actually blowing the thought away, and then you don't need to counterbalance. Because I don't want to necessarily define thoughts as good and bad, because in the world of duality in that game, what goes up must come down. But the truth is, we're actually in a non-duality world. We're perceiving duality. We're experiencing the thing called duality, but that's really not what's happening. And so,
that space you're talking about is that neutral space, the present moment.
Yeah.
When it is not anything, and then we make it something as soon as we think it, experience it, this, that.
Yeah.
Not just kind of sitting from that space of awareness, behind us.
Because if you're having a bad moment and someone says, well, think about the time you were in Hawaii, I'm like, that's not going to help you. It'll be a momentary distraction, because you're not in Hawaii, you're here. Mm-hmm. And when you're breathing, you notice your presence. And whether you're in Hawaii or, sitting at a bus stop somewhere in the rain, it ought not to really matter to your soul, to how you feel. Yes, to the sensations of the physical body, yes, it'll be different. I'm not here to tell you otherwise. That's ridiculous. But I don't want to have anxiety because it's raining out. I don't want that to affect me greatly. Yes, when it's raining out, I act differently than I would if it wasn't raining out. My body prefers a certain temperature, just like every human being does. We're in a variance, and if it goes on one end or the other end, I don't lose my shit. Mm-hmm. I used to, but I don't. I remember one time living in New York, and it was in the wintertime, and I flew down to Florida, because you can't just drive. Like in Arizona, I could drive to San Diego or even up north for that fact for 3 hours and be in a completely different climate. Well, in New York, you got to fly to be in a different complete climate. I get there and it rained 4 days out of the 7 days I was there. And I was pissed. I was like, who do I call? Call the governor and start yelling. It really was. I could have stayed home in the freaking cold, came down here and that's how I thought back then. I'm like, it better be nice when I get down there.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, and it drove me nuts.
Well, that's the thing. We're always trying to control everything.
We don't even know why. It's based on past experiences, and maybe maybe my past experiences it was a culmination of different things that happened. But in the summer, it was hot and sunny, and it must be the hot and sunny that made me happy. I'm like, no, it was a multitude of things. One is nothing was pulling at me, and that ought not to even be a problem. So then when I go places on vacation, it ought to be sunny out. And so I held on to that. And when I went place, I valued everything about that. So if I lucked out, so to speak, and it was sunny, I'm like, oh, it was great. And then you go down next time, like, oh, I don't know what happened to that place.
Yeah, exactly.
And your narrative becomes really narrow.
It's funny how our stories change, based on our feelings and where our level of awareness is at.
And where do we attach it to? That's the thing I was always searching for. I'm like, why did I prefer hot weather over cold weather, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I jokingly say I was born in the summer, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
But maybe there was more of a sense of freedom in the summer as a child, where I was forced to do things. But
it totally depends on the stories you assign with it. Because
Yeah.
I was born here in Arizona, and so to me, summers were always the worst.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I fucking hated summer. It was hotter than shit. Like, it just sucked.
Yeah.
110 degrees,
Exactly.
115 degrees. But yeah, like, and when you describe summer, that was like the time of your life in New York.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
That was kind of like the best time.
and it was just based on the premise story. So then we kind of what we call mature. Mm-hmm. Every season has its point, and each season cycle goes on. Each season's point will change; it never remains the same. So every summer wasn't the same, every fall wasn't the same, every winter wasn't the same. But I'm also aware these cycles happen. Yeah. So if I only like summertime, I am screwed for 3 months. I mean, for three other seasons. That's not a good way to be, So that's a tough life to live. And then you're trying to figure out how to be, a summer person. So I guess I moved to Arizona, and I was still miserable. No, I was kidding. But yeah, you start to realize, no, man, the physical world presents cycles. All right. So how can trying to like winter the same as summer isn't the way to go with it. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to. So now it's just like I allow it to happen, I don't try to take away the excitement of summer, so to speak, either. But I don't get so down in the winter. Mm-hmm. And then you start to realize, wow, it just, okay, now I appreciate the summer more, the spring more, and now I appreciate the winter because it makes me appreciate the summer.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. I see it. So it's just looking at it different perspective that doesn't aggravate my inner sanctity.
Thank you for the sunshine. Thank you for the rain.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You ever see a video with the little kid singing that?
I love that.
That's freaking
dude.
great. Yeah.
We played that once.
You can't help smile.
Like 6-8 months ago or something. We played that on the show.
And we all know that. So why do we forget it? Because we leave the present moment. So we're always drifting in our mind. So people are like, I want to time travel. I'm like, that's the only thing you've ever been doing, people. Seriously, when you're imagining what happened in high school and yesterday, and you're time traveling. Like, we don't want to time travel. We want to be present where we are. It's a gift. Mm-hmm. So, to hell with time traveling. I want to be here. And the way to be here, one of the techniques is
through the breath.
I'm here now, That's why when Karen starts talking to me, I go.
Start taking some deep breaths.
Yeah. Yeah.
I once heard somebody say that the breath is the best way practice to bring you into the present moment, because you can't breathe a past breath and you can't breathe a future breath.
No, you can't.
And I was like, that is very well said.
Yeah, you can't skip a breath.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the quickest way to bring you into this moment.
Remember that breath back in 72?
That was a great breath.
That was a great breath. I haven't had one since,
Yeah, that's one thing we don't reminisce about like we do many
maybe
other
if you had
things in
COPD,
yeah, right.
some type of lung issue, but
that's funny how that works.
But even if you do, like, if someone has some, some people that do it, actually, they then have to focus a little more on breathing and do that. They have to put a little more focus onto it. But, it's just, there's something about that that's miraculous. And the more we give our attention to it, like Dan was saying here to the audience, it changes you. Like when I'm talking to people and they seem to be agitated, and I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, I just, so I have them close their eyes because it's a quicker way, and just breathe in, breathe out. Have them do it 3 times. And I just say, how do you feel now? Like, better. I'm like, well, there you go. I didn't do anything. I just recommended it. Mm-hmm. And because you became, each breath, they went closer. Another breath, they came closer. And by the 3rd breath, they're here in the body. There's nothing out there. And all of a sudden, it felt better. Well, if you keep maintaining that throughout the day, and when you feel anxiety, just bring it in. So what happens that my level of understanding anxiety is very close now. I don't get out to the place where I'm erratic. I could feel the little, like, it's almost like eating. I know this bite will be my last of the meal or else I'll be full. Where before I could have went 5 more bites and like sitting on the couch like with a stomach ache, Mm-hmm. Now I realize, okay, as I'm picking up, this is most likely going to be the last bite. Mm-hmm. My body's already sensing it. And I know not to go beyond that intuitively. Mm-hmm. And because I've been practicing that. But if I wasn't paying attention while I was eating, I would just keep eating to the point like, oh my God, I'm full. Why did I eat those last 50 bites? Because I wasn't there. I wasn't present while I was eating. I was like watching a TV show or something,
mm-hmm. And that's it, man. We're creating that. It's that fortitude. It's a mental awareness. It's a new habit. It's a new pattern. You're taking away these unconscious patterns, and you're replacing them with momentary, like practical modalities that can help you, get to feel in alignment, because that's what we're all really looking for, is trying to feel in alignment. We feel so unaligned with, our goals, our finances, our, dreams, all of the above. But it's because you personally, you physically, you mentally are not aligned. And so as you begin to really hone in on that breath, and align this inner being, this instrument of a body that we have, man, things start to really click.
Yeah, so like the people in this audience right now, or maybe the people listening to this audience, you seem to be you're tuned in because you're listening. So doing these exercises are somewhat easy. But when you're at work or dealing with something that seems to be frustrating, that's the time to do it, to really see how it works. Like, it's easy to meditate when you had 8 hours of sleep and you have nothing pulling at you. But try doing this. Like, to me, this breathing and contemplation is far greater than meditation. Meditation to me is just a near experience. And what I mean that is because we live in a world of practicality aspects of, doing stuff, right? So my world doesn't consist of me just sitting on the couch all day and meditating. Mine, and these activities I enjoy. When I don't enjoy is because I'm in my head. It has nothing to do with the activity. Like, most people are like, I can't stay in my job. I'm like, well, why did you take the job? Well, I used to like it. Well, obviously you actually were excited about getting it. Most people were. I don't know anyone that was forced to, well, maybe they were forced to work based on some situation. They had to make more money they take a job that they didn't necessarily want, but that's not really the case for most people. But somewhere along the line, they lost the excitement of it because they weren't present. Period. They were looking forward and like, oh, it doesn't seem to be going the way I'm going. And then they look back. I'm like, man, I remember when I first saw it in this company, it was running so. Now you're like knocking the people running it. Meanwhile, they're running it the same probably. It's just your viewpoint back then was different. Your perspective was different because you were excited. Now it's like, yeah, it doesn't seem to be moving. I don't like the way people are running things. All of a sudden, man, it's just a narrative in your head.
Yep.
That really doesn't have any real basis of truth in it. Like, yeah, when you'll know if something's really running bad. I'm not saying it's not, but making that narrative when you're upset isn't helping. It's not going to help you anyway. But when you make that narrative in a more calm place, you might, okay, there's a job opportunity over here. I'm going to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and anything that we're, continuously narrating in our head, we then begin to experience. So every day, if we're saying, God, what this job's become, nobody values me, nobody even knows I'm here, my boss barely knows me, you cannot be surprised when you experience that. And this is like 101, just how this experience we call reality works. This is how this instrument works. We don't teach people that. Like, that's not a common type of practice, but at least now that science is coming out there, sharing, these types of concepts, people are starting to understand that, like, hey, the more I focus on how much something sucks, the more it sucks, and that's true.
But it's the way you feel it's a lens or a filter that's making it look sucky. Mm-hmm. But me and Mike are not saying by any means there's not a time to get out of something. Wow. But when I want to get out of something, I want to be clear-headed about it as much as I possibly can. So therefore, I can make a right decision, not like jump back into the same scenario. That's what happens a lot of times. People just get so frustrated and they leave, and they go to another job or another relationship, and
Same shit happens.
yeah, what happens in the beginning is the distractive part of it. Now you start telling like, oh yeah, you start talking to your coworkers. My last job, those people sucked, and give them 3 months. They'll be telling the same thing about these people they're working with because they never left the narrative and where they were.
And what do we call that in relationships? The honeymoon phase,
Yeah.
When you first start dating and all this, and then all of a sudden, holy shit, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and all it is a mere shift in perspective, which gives you a distraction rather than going down to the soul perspective of saying, well, okay, yeah, we know when something's working, we know when it's not. But, I want to be in the right mind when I make these decisions, not making them erratic. Because a lot of times I'm looking at stuff, oh, this sucks. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, does it really suck? Or can I build upon this thing and make it better? So, yeah.
So this next part of this next clip, Dan Millman does a great job of explaining presence. He gives a great job of explaining, in a very practical sense, what mindfulness is.
Yeah, and that's the key is simplify this stuff. We don't want to complicate it too much, but here we go.
We talk about mindfulness. We're talking about two kinds of mindfulness. Really, I've been described as an expert on mindfulness. I think my wife would beg to differ. When after I do the dishes, she'll say, Dan, come over here. Do you see this spot? It's called dirt. And so maybe I'm truly mindful 10 to 20% of the day, which is pretty good, starting out at 1 or 2%. But I have a desire to share some ideas about mindfulness and how we might bring that more and more into life and how we might practice. So that's why I'm here with you now. So when we're mindful, we can be mindful of what's inside our subjective content, our thoughts and emotions, as in meditation or other internal observing exercises. We can also be mindful of the world around us. Thus, the 1960s proverb, lose your mind and come to your senses. To notice things like the colors around us and what's going on. So really, mindfulness, when we talk about it, it's a popular term from the Buddhist tradition, and many Buddhist practices are becoming more popular today. They're doing fMRI studies of meditators and so on. Their mindfulness meditation is the traditional meditation, also called vipassana, used by the Buddha, apparently, of just simply noticing what's arising within when our eyes are closed or half closed, and we're not distracted by the outside. But really, what is mindfulness? It's paying attention. Now, that's not so easy to do. Very brief story. One day I was sitting on a curb in Berkeley, California, and I had about an hour before my training began, and I had a grapefruit. I was peeling it and eating chunks of the grapefruit, watching car exhaust at eye level. I was sitting down after all, and watching litter blowing in the streets. And for no reason I can explain, it was one of those transcendent experiences. Suddenly, everything around me was perfect, absolutely perfect. By the way, there was nothing in the grapefruit, as far as I know. But the car exhaust was perfect. The litter in the street was so perfect. Even though, when I was in college, the Vietnam War was raging, the world had problems, as it does today, and challenges. But I was unable to conceive of anything as less than a perfect part of our process of evolution unfolding. Now that sounds fairly transcendent, a moment of insight awareness, even illumination. But I believe it was just a few moments of free attention where I regained the eyes of a child. If you've looked into the eyes of an infant lately, they don't know what anything is, but it sure is interesting. So I regained that just for a little while because I had free attention. Most of the time our attention is not free. We're muttering to ourselves subliminally about what am I going to do about my relationship, my financial issues, my physical issues, my decisions coming up. And when we have those moments, sometimes when we travel and see beautiful natural environments, we wake up in a way we hadn't been at home, habituated to our usual environment. So this is aspects of what we call mindfulness. Now, Ernesto pointed out the bigger picture of life, what we're here for as human beings. Your mind may be buzzing with the provocative and stimulating ideas about the future and possibilities. And it's wonderful. It's an amazing amount of information. But you know what? It still comes down to moment living with ourselves. Wherever we go, here we are. So mindfulness isn't just paying attention. It's paying attention to the one moment of reality, this moment. When we talk about the present moment, we have to understand the paradox of that, because any physicist will remind you there's no such thing as the present moment. How do you grab a nanosecond? When is now? It's already past. If you were sitting in a boat flowing down a great river, from the viewpoint of an observer on the shore, you're moving through a river of time, from past, present to future. But from your viewpoint, sitting stably in that boat, you exist in the stillness, the eternal present. That's the paradox. It's the only place we can ever be. But our mind, our imagination, our memory flit from past to future. It's a wonderful human capacity. I wouldn't want to give it up. There are people with brain injuries who can't remember more than 30 seconds, and then life is anew. It can be very problematic. So the ability to remember, to learn, to have impressions of the past, to project our imagination into the future can be valuable. But it's also a source of suffering, dissatisfaction, anxiety, regret. Oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I had said that at the meeting that just happened. Or, oh, there's a toxic personality I have to meet today and deal with. Past and future. When we're suffering, that's the time to remember the only reality is this moment. Mark Twain, the American writer, once said, "I've had many troubles in my life, most of which never happened." We laugh because there's something true about that, isn't it? Most of our problems, anxieties, fears are about our imagination or things that are past. We can't change the past. Well, actually, we can. The best way I know of to change your past is to live constructively and productively in the present, because your present will soon become your past.
Love that.
Yeah.
Great. Well said, yeah.
Great. The way he covers mindfulness, kind of A to Z there, is awesome. And he gets a nice fresh take, too, because he explains how, it's when we're caught in the past or in the future is when we truly experience dissatisfaction. And that is the truth. When you're always thinking about what needs to be done, an hour from now, 2 hours from now, I can't wait to get off work. I can't wait to, get home. You're never in this one moment. And then you get home and now you're worried about what you got to do the following day. And it's this weird back and forth, type of thing. And it creates dissatisfaction. And I know that feeling because I experienced that feeling for a very long time. And it was through the breath. It was through awareness, which allowed me to kind of anchor myself in this, as he describes, this ever-changing moment, this ever-present moment.
Yeah, and using like the past and the future thoughts coming in, allowing you to come back to the present moment becomes a gift, because when you notice you're worrying about what happened yesterday, just noticing that you're worrying because what happened yesterday can bring you back to the present moment through, practice of breathing. Realizes, wow, if I drift into the past or I drift into the future, it's not a big deal. But starting out by saying you must be present, oh, another thing I have to do. Oh my God. Like he said, he started out by telling the story about his wife. I can relate to that too. He did the dishes. Hey, honey, did you look at the bottom of the plate? I'm like, we only eat off the top of the plates, honey. It's the big deal. But anyway.
We'll flip this one around.
Yeah, because it's like you want to pride yourself on being present. Well, if you were present, you wouldn't have missed the, whatever piece of food you didn't wash off of the plate. Mm-hmm. But the next time, like, okay, if I got defensive about that, that was a moment for me to be presently aware of being defensive rather than saying, yeah, she's correct, 100%. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't that big of a deal. But I'm like, oh, if I'm trying to be perfectly present, I'm going to live a miserable life as well. Because that's another task I have to, and then there's a fail rate, or there's a grade to be had. I'm like, okay, how many times? Like, okay, like he said, if I was only present 1% of the time and I moved up to 20%, great. But trying to say I need to be 100%, good luck. Now,
That will drive you just as nuts.
the power of paradox, you may get to 100%, but that's not the goal. You know, the goal is just when I'm aware of being distracted by the present and the future, I just know what to do now. You know, it was like when I was boxing. You're going along, and it's been like maybe a round or two before I got a straight jab to the face. I loosened up with the protection around my face, and also got a jab. Okay, my hands came back higher, and that's what happened. So, and then the more that happens, like you just keep your freaking hands up so that won't happen, type of thing. So you become more present in the moment. But it's impossible. Well, I don't want to say it's impossible, but the goal shouldn't be to constantly do that, because that then itself takes you out of the present moment. You're trying to predict something. So that's where, in that, the field of what we call the power of paradox becomes our friend. Where, okay, I don't need to be perfect. All of a sudden, you become more presently aware because you're not being pulled.
And this is where neutrality comes into play. Because, we're trying to be all positive. We don't want to have to worry about the negative. They're all this,
Or just change the way you define positive and negative. It's another way of moving up the scale, too. Like,
the more I go on my journey, I realize how important neutrality is.
Yeah.
You know, it's being indifferent. It's being, neutral in any given situation. Because as soon as you give a shift in that energy, or whatever way you want to deem it, you're making it into something. But when you rest in neutrality, it's kind of that space of presence to allow anything to come in.
Yeah, it's like the silence. So it's like when you breathe in, it's the point where you right before you breathe out, and then you breathe out the moment before you breathe in. That's the neutral place. And then the act that comes in between that. So just like music cannot be heard unless there's silence on either side of a note. And that's really what happens is, and that's where we can rest in that place, and that's where we stay in the neutrality, and that's where our true inner being really is. If you realize that, like what's witnessing my past moment, what's witnessing this moment, what's witnessing my future moment, that thing that's witnessing it is always neutral, right? I could pull up a story from when I was 18 and one from yesterday. That thing that's telling the story or witnessing the story wasn't 18 and it wasn't yesterday. It was always the same.
Yep.
It's like a camera shooting a movie. It's the same in every scene. It's just what it's recording on the film, or in this case on some gigabyte, I don't know too much about technology, but you know what I'm saying?
Whatever.
Yeah, on the hard drive. That's what's gathering information, but the lens itself is just allowing the light in and has no... It doesn't care if it's a love scene or a murder scene. It doesn't really care. It's just capturing everything. And as we look at that and stay present, okay, is this scene working for me or is it not? Okay, shift the scene. Don't, I did this wrong. I'm going to do it wrong forever. Like, well, you can go down that road till that gets old. It doesn't work. But it will work till you realize it doesn't work. So therefore, it worked in a weird way.
Do you have that one clip that I gave you? That's the short one where he talks about the college student, because this is a great time for us to kind of fit that clip in too. Because I'll let Dan Millman. He says it best.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this.
I'd like to share a story with you that will help convey an essential practice for everyday life that can actually change the course of your life. It began when a young man approached me one day on the street. He recognized me and said, "Dan, I read your book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and I loved it. And I know you do consultations with people, but you must charge a lot of money, and I'm a poor college student. So what can you tell me for $1?" And he gave me his dollar, and I told him 6 words that actually could change his life. And those 6 words are here and now, breathe and relax. With all the complications in the world and so many books to read and techniques and approaches and theories and methods, it all comes down to this: here and now, remember where you are and what time it is, the eternal present. And then breathe and relax fundamental qualities of life for more energy, for more health, stamina, creativity. These things can help us bring more presence to all that we do. And this is a core practice of a peaceful warrior.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's the key right there is a lot of times in the spiritual realm or in this practice of stuff, we tend to complicate things, and that's what takes us out of it. Actually, the spiritual life is the most simplistic life, you know, because the world, like, think about this, the universe is very complex, but the utilization of it is simple. And the way I use this analogy is like, say, like when I was a kid, like in the late 70s, early 80s, when we started working on computers in school, the computers compared to today were very simplistic, but the utilization was complex. So in order to, I remember I was able to get my name to go across the screen and come in a diagonal. I thought that was really cool, but there was a lot of coding involved. So in order to get that, if you like left one semicolon out or one slash out, it just didn't work. So you had to go back and read everything, and there was a whole coding, and then you did it, and all of a sudden Frank Daly would go across it. I'm like, woo, like holy, like, yeah, like it's like Pog, you know.
Seriously though, but it's cool. I
yeah,
know what you're
but
saying.
now today, you know, my iPhone, the amount of complexity in that is greater than a building full of computers back in the 1970s. But the utilization of my iPhone is so simplistic. So the universe is 1 trillion times more complex than this cell phone, but yet we want to make it complex to use. It's not. The more complex something is, the more easy the utilization of it. And if you don't believe me, just pay attention to your body. Do you have to tell it what to do when you eat food? No. When you breathe in, it knows where to go. It knows what the oxygen do. We don't have to think about our body. It just happens.
Do you have to pump your heart?
Everything we think about, we get involved in, we actually break down. Yeah. So, yeah, there's actions or putting stuff in the playful of the world. Like if I want to plant a garden, I put a seed in here. So I'm actually doing the work of, you know, the agriculture aspect of placing the garden where I want it. But the universe takes care of the seed with the soil and everything else. I have nothing to do with that. I just know how it works, so I do it. I'm like, oh, look at all the flowers. Look at the flowers I grew. I'm like, you may have put them in that area, but you didn't do that. And it's kind of nice. So if the flowers don't grow, it's not my fault. And so when we start to simplify everything, all of a sudden this understanding of things moving quicker in an exciting way appears. We were children. Time flew by quickly because we lived a more simplistic life. We complicate things as we get older. So now life can seem to move slow when you're in tyranny in your mind. Like it's you know, I imagine there's very few prisoners that saying like, my God, 20 years, where did time go?
Right.
You know, but yet when you're in the sense of freedom, time seems to flow by because of the simplicity of it. So just recognize that. Go in and know what's happening. I'm like, life is a lot more simplistic than we think. We think we have to figure everything out. We don't. But when we're present, we'll know how to interact. We'll know what to do in that moment. We will. We always do. But if you're so busy doing something else is why you hit the car in front of you. But how often do you hit the car in front of you? Because you're mostly awake when you're driving the car. So if we could say more, like he said, mindful and present, all of a sudden life just seems to flow in this dance because the dance has already started. We didn't create the dance. It's like when you go to a nightclub or something and people on the dance floor, you just step in and you start dancing the way the people on the dance floor. If you start dancing to some other song, it's going to look weird. You step in and then start moving with the audience and or the rest of the dancers. All of a sudden, you lose yourself in the dance. It's this brilliant thing that happens. Right? It really is. What did you do? You just stepped into it. You know, maybe in the beginning it was a little clunky until you got your rhythm and you step into it. Oh, man, this is nice. It just took over when you were on the dance floor.
And what are you doing? You're going with the flow.
You're going with the flow. You're actually just stepping into it.
You know?
Yeah. It's organic. But if I'm thinking about how am I dancing, I'm dancing clunky. If I'm comparing myself to the person next to me, I'm clunky. But if I don't pay attention to it and somebody was videotaping it, all of a sudden I look back, I'm like, wow, we were flowing together.
Yep.
That's what athletes do all the time, you know? Like even in the fight sport, like when you see a really good fight, those athletes were dancing with each other. You know, that's the
They'll
art of.
say that too.
Yeah, the art of boxing is to dance. You know, it's not necessarily a fight. Like they call there's a distinguish between a fighter and a boxer. A boxer is just dancing. They're just trying to out dance or end up in the right position before the other one does, and it creates a disturbance. But even then, they have to get back into the balance of it. It's a brilliant thing to watch. Outside of the fact that it might have a black eye at the end of it, but nonetheless, there's something about that we like about that. You know, we like to see the give and take in every movement. You know, and it's brilliant. That's how the universe is designed. It's a wave pattern, and when we get into the wave pattern and move with it, it's congruent. But when we fight against it, it becomes interference, and so the interference. We don't like the way that feels. So that would be the negative aspect of it. But it's because we're thinking about it too much. We're overly thinking.
One thing, too, I'll mention just briefly on this clip is this is something I started doing a lot the last 2 weeks, and it really helped me center myself. You know, just those 6 words that Dan Millman talks about, you know, here and now, and then it's breathe and relax. And I thought that was just so powerful because it's kind of like a reset. So, you know, you feel yourself getting caught up or whatever's going on. And just by bringing that sense of awareness to, hey, here and now, this moment, and then breathe and relax, it's like a reset into the present. And what I've realized and learned is this brain that we have is this giant algorithm, and it's this very powerful device, right? And we're not in control of it. It's running on overspeed, it's running on hyperdrive, it's doing its own thing. And so with little practices like these 6 words that Dan Millman shared, what you're doing is now you're creating a new neural pattern, a new neural network, something that's saying, hey, wait, I don't need to be caught up in thought, what needs to be done, etc., all of that. I can be right here, I can be in this moment. And you try doing that for a couple of days, and then it turns into a couple of weeks, and then that evolves into years. And holy shit, you're now a new person.
Yeah, like if you breathe in and breathe out a couple of times, you notice you feel good. Why aren't you doing it all the time? Because you think, I can't be doing that when I'm
too
working.
Busy.
Too busy doing what? You got to breathe anyway.
Exactly.
You could have a conversation. Like right now when I'm talking, I'm noticing the oxygen coming in and out my nose, I'm breathing at a different rate as I talk, but I'm aware of it. But yet I'm still able to know what words are coming out, because the cool thing about the human body and the mind, I don't need to relearn the word as it's coming out of my mouth. It's just now it's attached to a vibration, a feeling. So if I have a feeling, like there's once in a while, like I'll have a feeling and I'm trying to grasp for a better word that I might not use a lot. So I'll pause and I'll look up. But nonetheless, most of the time it does come out. And it wasn't me thinking about it. It just did. So it's a beautiful thing about having the human mind. But the breathing, when I give more attention to that, all of a sudden the flow, and I'm more relaxed. And when more relaxed, the antenna, if you will, works even greater than it would if it didn't otherwise. So you're more prepared. Like even Navy SEALs, when they're doing, I would read about how they would, when they're doing something somewhat dangerous, they have to stay focused. They would do like a set of box breathing. So they breathe in. So they're actually with their guns out, and they would be breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4 out. They're keeping their heart rate low because they don't want to make any mistakes, because they're up against the wall. Like it's not like an everyday type of situation. So they have to keep their heart rate and relax as much as they can, because in that situation, they'll narrow down the field of mistakes almost down to a percentage point, if that. And that works. Now, you don't have to put yourself in the situation like a Navy SEAL does in order to have this. Like, that's the beauty of it. You just breathe in and breathe out and watch what happens to your day. It will change your life. And it's simple. It's free.
It's just a new type
Except
of focus.
every time you do this, you have to pay Dan $1.
Mr. Millman.
Yeah.
I love it.
Mike's got to mail him $1 now because he
yeah, exactly.
took his advice.
Because I took his advice. Dan has a TED Talk too, right?
Yeah.
Don't we have something like that pulled
yeah,
up?
we'll
I wonder
pop
how
this
that
up.
went.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you at the TEDx Berkeley event today. I teach something, an approach to living
I call the Peaceful Warrior's Way. But I would like to set a context for what I'm about to share with you, so let me give you a sense of my story in brief. When I was a young man at Berkeley, training in a gym right across the street, and that old gas station in the story, in the movie and the book, was about 2 blocks from here on Oxford and Hurst, I used to do things like this. But now I'm into my 68th year on planet Earth, so you won't see me doing much of that anymore. In fact, they've moved my books from the New Age section to the Middle Age section in the stores. But back then, I was focused, almost obsessed with the idea of talent and understanding what that meant. I defined talent as the ability to learn something quicker and easier and rise to higher levels. That seemed like a fair estimation of talent. And I asked, could it be developed? Is it innate or developed? And it seemed to me intuitively, and since research has confirmed, that talent is about 20% innate, body type and so on, for sports. But about 80% could be developed. And I said, back then when I was training as an athlete and when I was coaching at another university down the peninsula, I started working with that idea. What constitutes physical talent? What helps people learn faster and easier and rise to higher levels? And what if I trained a foundation and my athletes developed that before focusing on the skills of gymnastics? So it seemed to me that strength and flexibility and coordination and rhythm and timing and reflex speed and balance all contributed to this ability to learn faster and easier. So for the first year, I trained the athletes in all these qualities. And the team went from the bottom of the conference to one of the top 3 teams in the nation in about 3.5 years. I trained the top U.S. Olympian as well. So my theories did work in practice. And I might still be coaching today. But I was going through some things in my own life outside the gymnasium. And I realized being able to do handstands and somersaults didn't help me much when I went out on a date. And those skills really didn't apply directly when I got married or had children and dealt with financial challenges and career decisions and all the challenges of everyday life we all face. So that's when I started asking bigger questions. How can we as human beings develop a talent, not necessarily for sports, but a talent for living, for the actual changes of everyday life? Now, I've said a few things about my story, but let me acknowledge your story. You have a story as well, and it's your treasure, because no story on the planet is exactly like yours. It's not as if you just have a story, you are a story in the making. You're a novel being written, and you never know what the next chapter is going to be. So I want to acknowledge that. We've all overcome adversity and difficulties in our life. Now, I could be wrong about that, so maybe I can ask for a show of hands. Would you raise your hand, please, if you've experienced physical, emotional, or mental pain in your life? Could I see a show of hands out there? Thank you. Okay, we do have that in common. I think you'd agree, though, that difficulty, that pain, that adversity you may have dealt with, because of that, you're a little bit stronger now, maybe a little bit wiser, and maybe even have a greater sense of compassion and perspective for having gone through that. So we don't have to pretend to like difficulties when they come, but we need to keep that thread of attention that there are hidden gifts depending on how we respond to it. That's what I learned. So that question of how we can develop talent for living actually led me around the world studying with various mentors over more than a decade, pretty intensively. And it led to this approach to living I call the Peaceful Warrior's Way. That's not my way. It's not something private to me. It's not a club one needs to join. It's our way, because everyone I've seen is striving to live with a more peaceful heart. But there are also times in our lives that we need a warrior's spirit. Everyday challenges that call forth that warrior spirit inside of us. So that is what I do. It's about peaceful heart, warrior spirit. It's a sense of balance, living with our head in the clouds, but our feet on the ground. So then you might ask, well, what would be a peaceful warrior's approach to catalyzing change? Well, let's be very realistic. When things are going great in our lives, and we've all had moments, periods like that, when everything was going great, we don't want change. At those points, we want everything to stay the same, but it doesn't. And so life changes. Life is full of change. And so but when things aren't going well, when we have some challenges in our life coming up, then we're looking for change. Some of us, it's enough to catch a cold, and we start re-examining our life. You know what I mean? So anytime we face some adversity, some challenge, we start to reflect and look at our lives once again and wonder if we can make some changes. Now, there are two sorts of changes. There's external changes brought about by political activism, changing our technologies, institutions, social institutions. So there's this great tradition of changing the world, improving the world around us. And it's very important. There is also a tradition of internal change, psychological, spiritual, personal growth, where people say, I think the greatest difference I can make is changing myself, and then I can bring more into the world and be more useful. Now, for some people, there's a contradiction between those two sorts of change. They say, I don't want to be a navel gazer and just thinking about myself, and I want to be politically active in the world. Well, I actually confronted this important question. I was walking down Telegraph Avenue in the late 60s with Socrates. The Vietnam War was raging. I was doing a lot of work on myself at the time. Self-reflection, self-observation, self-analysis. I was even doing a form of self-massage from the ancient Mongolian warriors to clear fear-produced tension from the bone surfaces of every bone in the body. It took about 6 hours. So I was doing a lot of personal processing. And at the same time, as we walked down Telly, I noticed a poster about starving children and oppressed peoples, and anti-war activism and organizing. And I turned to Sock and I said, Sock, I feel kind of guilty or selfish doing all this work on myself when there are so many people in need out there. And he didn't say anything at first. Then suddenly he turned to me and he said, take a swing at me. I said, what? Did you hear what I was just saying? He said, come on, I'll give you $5 if you can slap me on the cheek. Go ahead. Well, I figured it was some kind of test he was giving me, so I bobbed and weaved, and finally I took a swing at him. In the next moment, I found myself on the ground in a rather painful wrist lock. And as he helped me to my feet, he said, you notice a little leverage can be very effective? I said, yes, I noticed. He said, well, if you want to help people, of course, do what your heart tells you to do. But don't neglect the work on yourself, because that's what's going to give you the clarity, the courage to know how to exert the right leverage at the right place at the right time and really make a positive difference in the world. So it's not a question of either or, this kind of change. It's a matter of both, outward and inward.
Beautifully said.
I was going to say, that was real powerful. This is a great talk of his.
Yeah, because we do live in this world where we focus on the outside as well, but a lot of times we neglect the inside. And yeah, when you see something that needs to be activated in activism, but if you're not good with yourself, you actually end up becoming worse or creating a worse problem. That's what we see a lot. But when you work within yourself, you'll see what to do. It doesn't mean you negate it or run from it. You actually have a better chance. The greatest soldiers are the greatest warriors are the calmest warriors. They can take someone down quickly with very little destruction. And they do it because their precision of understanding their skill is within. But anyone could flail and, do a lot more destruction than they could if they were precise, concise with their emotions. So when you go and work on yourself first, you actually have a better chance of helping the world outside of you. It's this and that, but when you start with the inner world, the outer world becomes easy to deal with. It becomes more simple. But if you're starting with the anger and trying to go outward, you just tend to make things worse. And we've all experienced that. Like when I try to do brute force onto something, it didn't work. But when it went in and met it with kindness, it actually got resolved. It doesn't mean I ran from it. I don't run from it. Now I just approach it differently, completely different. Yeah.
And so some things I wrote down were he was talking about the peaceful heart and the warrior spirit, and those are one and the same. You know, that peaceful heart is that place of neutrality. You know, and the warrior spirit, it's the knowing that, hey, whichever way this shakes out, I'm gonna make it work. There's a way out for me. Too often we kind of look at situations like, oh, that didn't go my way, so that was a waste of time, or, you know, this actually just set me back, or this held me back. But that moment was needed. You know, we don't have the foresight now. You know, we don't see it until we look back at a situation. But there's never anything in life that is, you know, not for you or not supposed to happen. You know
nothing's
what I mean?
wasted. Yeah, nothing's wasted in a sense.
And so I thought that was what I got from what he was saying when he was talking about the peaceful heart, warrior spirit, is the warrior spirit knows that, hey, I'm supposed to be experiencing all of this. What's going on right now, you know, whether I like it or not, or deem it important or not, it plays into some future role, if you will, or something down the line that without it, I wouldn't be where I'm at.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because when you're present, you become naturally more efficient. But my future moment, I don't know what that efficiency would be. But in the past, when I wasn't as efficient, I'm realizing, okay, so someone will say this is progress, or, you know, how we develop in the world, we become a little more efficient. So what is efficiency? We use less energy to move more. You know, just like an airplane, the higher it gets up into the sky, you know, taking off, it needs a lot more energy than it does at 32,000 feet. So the higher we go, the more efficient. So even if it went from 30,000 feet to, say, 60,000 feet, and say it had the capacity to do that, it would need even less energy. And so that's what the peaceful warrior is about. It's like every time I step into this, okay, that's great. How can I make it more efficiency? That's where it's coming back to the present moment. How can I look at it? I'm not knocking what I just did. Because if I do that, then I'll keep doing the same thing. I want to do it differently. Like, no. You've learned how to be more efficient in this moment because, you know, it wasn't that you were less efficient. It's just you realize there's a lot less I can do. Like in any sport, or, you know, learning an instrument, anything you're learning, you learn to become more efficient in that field. The more you do it, the more you become more efficient. That's the natural progression. But you don't need to knock the old way in which you did it in comparison to where you are.
Well, when you hear the word warrior, you know, you think fight, you think, you know, strength, you think determination, you know, grinding. You like all these words come to mind, but that's what's so powerful about, you know, the way of the peaceful warrior, because it's effortlessly, you know, it's a knowing, it's a space, and to say that one warrior is stronger than the other warrior is simply silly, and so. You can have this title of warrior, you can have this mentality of warrior, but it doesn't have to be coming from a place of, you know, fighting, attacking, grinding, all of these things that we were taught. You know, it's actually coming from a space of neutrality, a space of knowing, a space of trusting. That is a true warrior.
Yeah, and a warrior is someone that could just deal with the moment in which they're in the most efficient way. So it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with physical harm or physical anything. It doesn't. But they're just dealing with it in what's happening. They're dealing with it as peaceful as they can. And what is peaceful in this situation mean? Is efficient as possible. Because when you're at peace, things are more relaxed. When things are not relaxed, it means I'm wasting energy somewhere that I could be focusing here. So we get, you know, and would I ever get that 100%? I'm like, absolutely. Well, I shouldn't say absolutely not, but like there are moments when I do, and then there's moments when I don't. And the moments when I don't, it brings me back to my breath and brings me back to the present moment. And when I scale out, I realize, okay, I'm more present more than I was in the past. But the past should not be measurement of my present now either, because I didn't do anything wrong in what we call the past. Because therefore, what I'm doing now is wrong to my future. I'm like, and I can't look at it that way. It would stop me from doing anything. There's very little we know other than what's in front of us in the present moment. And then the calmer I am, the easier I can deal with it, with less resistance, you know?
And that's the way of the true peaceful warrior.
Yeah, it's a great way to end the show.
You know? But truly, that is like that in its essence is exactly what Dan Millman's getting at. That's honestly what Dan's 18 different books are about too.
Yeah.
You know, for us to describe it so simply, you know, it's a simple idea, but it takes immense amount of practice and focus and real like true focus, because it sounds very simplistic to say, oh yeah, you know, this way of neutrality is a, you know, the way to create space, the way to, you know, find opportunity, the way to focus, you know, on what you want. But it takes so much, again, this is in the paradox, there's an effort involved with, you know, establishing this sense of awareness. There's an effort involved in not touching or not clinging or holding on to these thoughts as they come up like we normally would and start to beat ourselves up. And so it's like kind of this in and out type of, you know, maneuvering that you'll start to see yourself doing, where, you know, you're keeping the focus, you know, you're keeping that the direction, but at times you have to let go and back off, you know, take the foot off of the gas, you know, and accept the situation and allow it to be. And so you start to find your groove in this.
Yeah, and know that anyone listening to this, you have a skill that you've developed over the years. And when you first started out in that skill, it seemed to be a little arduous and complex. But now it's not. Now it's just adding little, you know, insight to it. And they're just nuances to keep going and keep developing. And so if you're just starting out new with this, trying to stay present, yeah, it's going to seem arduous in the beginning, but trust me, if you just breathe in a couple of times, like 3 times once a day, and notice you feel good, then do it again tomorrow, and then go a week, and then add, instead of do it twice a day, you're going to start noticing you're feeling more, and all of a sudden this difficult thing won't be difficult. You're taking one step at a time. You know, it's like every 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. So don't overthink it. If you're doing something new, just take it in a small stride, because each stride that you take, one step equals one stride, and over time, 1,000 miles will appear. The difference is you just keep going. So why not start now? Just simplify it. Breathe in and breathe out. Just do it 3 breaths in the morning, 3 at night. And then if you're feeling frustration, do them anytime you want, you know, whenever you need it. And watch it become your practice, you know. And all of a sudden, you'll notice the synchronicity of life. You feel better. Your outlooks are better. And all of a sudden, one day, you realize, I've always been the peaceful warrior. I really have. I never brought it out. We're all the peaceful warriors within us, you know.
Every one of us.
Every one of us. It's just about developing it. To what degree? Whatever degree I can. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a
and to whatever degree you're willing to.
Yeah, it's ongoing.
Yeah.
I don't know what degree I can take anything to, but I'm going to keep going. Why not? I'm here. So if you start out with the peaceful warrior, everything else in life that comes in front of you is just easy to deal with. Rather than try to change the outside world, change the heart within you, and then the outside world, it's not too bad.
No.
It's like, oh, okay. And
you start to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
You know, a true reflection of your inner state.
Yep. Because if a warrior went onto a battlefield and needed everyone to choreograph into their liking so they could win, that's not much of a warrior, right? They go into a battlefield not even know who the enemy really is until they meet with them. And then they respond based on what happens. That's a real warrior. There's no choreographing at all. It's all improv. And that's the way. When you live life improv, it's great. When you choreograph it, it's weird. It really is.
And we know this. Look at reality shows.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like
they feel so forced and they feel so fake and all that.
Yeah,
it's because
before
we pretend they're real, but then we know they're not. You know?
Yeah, that's why they have to have laugh tracks.
Yeah, and that's just
kind of weird.
Why certain things are like, oh, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you can see where things are being forced or created or, you know.
But when you watch a comedian live, there is no laugh track. When they're laughing, it means he caught you. He was the laughing warrior, if you will. And it's brilliant. That's why we like to watch live shows. It really is. And life is live. It's live. It's no matter what. You can't stop. You can't. Oh, stop. Hey, when you go to ask me a question, ask me this question.
Well, that's what why the
weird.
funniest things in the world are always just like right in that moment when you start dying laughing with somebody, you know, when you least would have expected something to happen a certain way, or it's just so funny because they said that.
Yeah.
It's the spontaneity. It's the in the moment. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, but once they say, knock, knock.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
right?
like, all right.
You know what to expect.
Please don't hit me with a knock, knock joke.
You know
right?
what to expect.
Yeah.
But,
Who's there?
Yeah, exactly. Athena, shout out to you for suggesting Dave Millman, or excuse me, Dan. Excuse me, Dan Millman. Great suggestion.
Now you owe him $2.
Yeah, now I got to send him $2. This was a fun read. This was a great watch over the last few weeks, and then of course I'm gonna actually rewatch the movie too. The path of the the path or the way of the peaceful warrior. I want to watch the actual film because it's been a while. I pulled up the trailer before we started today to kind of familiarize myself, and I do remember I've seen it. I remember that kid actor in it, the guy that played the teen.
Yeah, they're playing it was gymnasts as well, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be exciting. He's got a lot of good content out there, too. You can go to peacefulwarrior, I believe it is, .com. He's got his own content there, but he's also on YouTube, and there's a lot of great podcasts. So if anything that you heard today resonated, go take a deeper dive into Dan Millman's stuff. He's got some great content out there, these TED Talks, all of this. It's good reminders. It helps you stay on track, and most importantly, it keeps you in the present moment.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll see you guys next week.
Yes, we will. If you have any comments or questions, just email us at perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com. And we love when people give us ideas to talk about because we could always use those. And if you have any questions about anything we talked about, again, don't hesitate.
Yeah, please reach out, guys. Send us in some of the people you're liking and following. Frank and I would love to dive deep into them and then share them here on Perspective Shift with you guys.
All right. Peace out.
We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.